What's going on, guys? It's Simo. No, okay, I'm not gonna do that. Should I do that stream? I shouldn't do that.
No, you shouldn't.
What?
You shouldn't do that. It's so annoying. When someone does that.
Welcome back to the ban list channel. Instead of talking about the ban list for the fourth time this week, we're going to be looking at some side decking options. I have compiled a very nice document which you can check out in the description down below, and you can find a little spreadsheet of all the different options and stuff you can play versus what deck, whether you're going first or second. So give that a look if you're interested. Now, this list is going to be primarily designed around going versus this deck. It doesn't take into consideration what you're playing, but it does obviously give you some options that are good going first and second. And I will be doing a bit of a side decking in-depth thing in the future, a more general thing for you to learn and understand. But obviously, some cards are not going to be good going first as compared to going second, and vice versa. So think about this before you put these cards into your list. See how these cards synergize with your own personal deck, whether you're playing an actual meta deck or even something rogue. Clearly, you're not going to be playing something that shuts you down as compared to if it's shutting down the meta deck. So first and foremost, we're going to start off with Sky Striker. Very easy and simple to assume that this deck is most definitely going to be the deck of the format, at least for YCS Milan coming up, the first event. So if we're going first against Sky Striker, some ideas here for you. You could have an artifact package with Scythe to completely shut down any sort of link plays they'll be doing. Anti-Spell, you can't go wrong with that. They simply cannot play. Shared Ride is a turn-ending card in the same way that Max C can end special summoning for some decks. F's and comments from Max C. Now, Shared Ride, remember, also lets you draw a card if they add a card from the graveyard, not just from the deck. So Kagari is actually going to trigger Shared Ride and give you a draw. Remember that. A lot of people do seem to forget that. For hand traps, we have Ogre on the multi-roll. That's pretty decent. Going first as well, you have Imperial Order. I mean, I don't think that's pretty audible at all for that deck. Various Floodgates also work extremely well against Sky Striker. Goes in Rivalry, but obviously make sure that these don't also shut you down from being able to play the game, because otherwise there would be no point in signing this. Magic Deflector is a card that's going to shut down about half the engine cards in Sky Striker. So going first, you're going to be stopping the field spell from getting a plus. Any of the quick play spells are not going to be able to resolve, like Widow Anchor, etc. And most important of all, multi-roll is not going to be able to have any sort of recursion. So these are all different cards that get shut down just by the singular Magic Deflector, and it's a very good card to set up, stun your opponent, and then go for the kill next turn. Storm Duster as well is a very, very good card, and you can maybe side this going second as well if you anticipate a bit of a grindy matchup in like a mirror or something. But Storm Duster is a +1, especially if they've used a multi-roll on their first turn. You're going to be able to just straight up banish the two cards. Going second, evenly matched is an option, but again, evenly matched is a little bit weird depending on how good the player is. Sometimes they'll just go balls deep and just set 5 off the multi-roll or something, and then get blown out by it. So, you know, you have to make sure you kind of gauge your opponent depending on how good evenly is going to be. But generic back row is going to be really awesome as well, like your Twin Twisters, Cosmic Cyclone. Cosmic Cyclone obviously banishes, so that's good. It's not going to have any recursion from the Kagari. However, Twin Twister is most likely you should be using this on the multi-roll returns and sets, but feel free to hit random back row as well if you feel so inclined and necessary, like a strike, for example, can easily shut you down, which Sky Strikers can sometimes main deck or side themselves. The most important going second card, and this is probably going to affect mostly Burning Abyss players, but that's Kaijus. The Kaiju means that they're going to have a monster in the main monster zone, and this means that they can't use any Widow Anchors, Eagle Boosters, or Shark Cannons during your turn. And it basically just shuts down the entire engine. They can't actually play if they have a monster in the main monster zone. So you're free to do whatever you want going second. Pretty much the only thing you'll be worrying about at that point will be hand traps. And some generic cards for going first or second really just kind of depends how you're feeling and what you kind of see in these cards. And that's going to be Ghost Spell, DD Crow, Call by the Grave. And I'm going to be mentioning Call by the Grave throughout this video, so I'm not going to mention it again. But just so you know, I assume everyone will be maining Call by the Grave this format. There's really no reason not to. It hits a lot of engine cards, the hand traps as well. So from now on, just assume Call by the Grave is in against everything. But Cherries and Ogre, as well, as I've mentioned, these are all really strong cards going first and going second. The second deck we're going to be looking at is Thunder Dragon. We have Artifact Scythe, can pretty much just shut down the turn there. So if you're going to be playing an artifact package, you do have some crossover depending on which matchups you're playing against. Dimensional Barrier cards we haven't seen around or in the meta for a long time. Very good. Call Fusion, what do you do? Not real much against if you're playing Thunder Dragon, so that's an option. Mind Drain can be a little bit weird. It's kind of okay. It's a little bit strange to think that Mind Drain is a good card, but that itself can completely shut down the deck depending on their hands. There Can Only Be One is very popular as well. It means that they're not going to have too much of an easy time making any sort of link monsters, but most importantly, if they do somehow manage to establish a fusion on the field, one single card is probably not going to be enough to stop your deck. The final card for going first you might want to consider is Zombie World. Turning all of their thunders into zombies means that, well, they are not going to have any thunder to fuse into Colossus and into Titan. So they're pretty much going to be neglected of any kind of boss monsters, but do watch out for any link plays they might have involved with this. Going second, you have a lot of options like Lancias, Mind Control, Book of Eclipse, Super Poly, Metaion, Evenly Matched, and Forbidden Apocrypha as well. These are all various cards that you can use, and it kind of depends on what you think are the best ones, but there's a lot of options here for going second against Thunder Dragons. Apocrypha is also very important because it doesn't destroy, it sends monsters off the field, so it means that the inherent defense ability of Colossus and Titan aren't going to be able to banish and protect themselves. The next deck, we're going to be looking at the Warrior Hand Loop / Rongo thing, which I assume is not going to be popular to begin with, but will probably see a huge rise in the coming future, especially with the called back to 3, the Neospace connector. There's a lot of things going well for this deck, so do side for this and be prepared for it. But you can have There Can Only Be One going first, and Forbidden Graveyard are awesome tech cards that you can side in for this deck. Going second, you just want to flood them with hand traps. That's pretty much what you want to do. Lots of effect negation. You want to stop them from doing anything as best as you can, especially with Call by the Grave. You need to put in a lot of hand traps to make sure that if they do Call by the Grave one of your hand traps, you have some kind of a follow-up, and even then, sometimes they can play through that, which is very scary. But you're going to be looking at cards like Gammas, Lancias, Veilers, Reaper, and Impermanence is the most, definitely the best one that you can use here. But Encore is another card as well if you don't want to be playing too many hand traps. XE Encore is a card that can be activated regardless of whether or not the special summoning condition is like active on Rongo, because it's like a danger monster under Rivalry or Vanity's Emptiness even. It resolves as much of the effect as possible. So while Rongo is unaffected as a monster by all card effects, affecting the materials is actually completely different from affecting the monsters. So the monster itself is separate from its materials, and you're actually encoring the materials, not the monster itself. Weird ruling, I know, but that's actually how Encore works. And the special summon effect isn't going to be relevant. Although if you detach enough materials, you probably can actually play your deck from that point. The next deck we're going to be looking at is Altergeists, and this deck is pretty much hurt by some of the floodgates we mentioned earlier. For example, Goes in Match severely cripples this ability to do anything because of the huge array of different attributes this deck has. There Can Only Be One as well is pretty decent. Storm Duster going first on the end phase is really awesome for the +1 on the back row, which is mostly we're going to be worrying about. Speaking about back row, going second, you're going to have a lot of problem cards in Altergeist to deal with. So you could red reboot them, and that will basically cold way them for the turn. And if you're playing an OTK deck, well, there you go. You've basically got game there. Evenly Matched is very popular as well, but sometimes it's not that great because they can still end on a multi-faker. So Evenly Matched can be hit or miss depending on how good your hand is. Denko Sekka, if your deck can play it. So for you Thunder Dragon players, you're definitely going to be wanting Denko Sekka versus Altergeist. Typhoon is a very good card as well, and it's really important if you're playing Sky Striker, just in case they side in Secret Village. That card is pretty much going to shut your deck down completely. So having an out ready for that is very important. Prankatrops as well is another card that deals with just spot removal in that deck. And I would highly recommend Prankatrops across the board. Maybe not even just for Altergeist. You can probably play it against a bunch of decks. But Prankatrops particularly excels versus Altergeist. Going first and second, there's a whole bunch of things. Twisters is kind of good going first and second. It's not really too bad. It's kind of like Storm Duster. You can hit it on the end phase, or going second as well. You can deal with their back row. Kind of a main deck card rather than a side deck card. If you want to main deck back removal, like you have that option with Twisters. It does have that sort of ability to be a catch-all versus different decks. And some of the more effect negation-based things, and these are going to be very niche. Probably if you're playing Burning Abyss, maybe Draco, you'll have the option to play Inspector Border and Majesty's Fiend, which are okay against Altergeist going first and second, respectively. And the final deck of the meta is going to be Burning Abyss. Safe to assume that out of 5 decks in the meta, Burning Abyss will probably be the 5th most viable this format with almost no hits whatsoever. Dante continues to live on. But for going first against this deck, you might be considering something like Forbidden Graveyard. Set this, it means they can't activate anything in their grave. Wait, of course, until they actually begin committing to a play. So you flip this, they can kind of lose there. D-Barrier, it was as strong as back in 2016 as it is today versus this deck. Colixy, pretty much not able to do anything. Maybe a Link play or two, but nothing substantial that'll be threatening to your board. Or to your win condition throughout the duel. Di-Fi, Macro, I mean, if they can't resolve the graveyard, that's really what you're trying to be stopping here. Make sure that you do your best to stop something from resolving in the grave, and you pretty much got Burning Abyss by the balls. Now, going second, the most important card that you're going to be dealing with is Beatrice. So I think the best option for dealing with her will be Kaijus, especially if they're a little bit greedy and they don't want to shotgun Beatrice in the standby phase. Putting a Kaiju straight over means they're not going to have any disruption for you whatsoever. But most important of all, Beatrice's graveyard effect won't trigger. And that basically means, well, what does the deck do once Beatrice hasn't resolved? You're kind of relying on Dante's and some Link monsters. It's kind of a yikes if you're playing Burning Abyss at that point. And generic cards as well. Ghost Reaper is extremely good against this deck because if you hit them early enough with just the Dante, basically can't play at that point. However, Reaper doesn't always end the deck as quickly as you could imagine. If they get the Seer Dante loop going, it doesn't matter about the next 2 or 3 Dantes because they can still rank up to Beatrice and they can still keep that that loop going for Link plays. That's my video for today. Thanks everyone for watching. If you enjoyed this, subscribe. Make sure you follow me on Twitch to watch every day. Join the Discord community at discord.gg/Farfa. Follow me on Twitter, Farfa at FarfaYGO. Leave a comment down below if you disagree or have any other suggestions that you think I've missed. Check out the spreadsheet and stuff. And until next time, my name has been Masterpiece. That's a haha right there. Okay, right, we're done. All right, finally.